we know about the data is women tend to strike first. They tend to use weapons to a greater degree. Men tend to use their own hands.
How about getting those hands trained?
Where them kicks at? Where them hands? Where them holes? Where them throws? You know what I'm saying? Cecil.
Dr. T. Hassan, is that his name? Oh boy. Yes, Dr. T. Hassan Johnson is a black masculinist. I guess you would say that is the opposite of a white feminist. Because I listen to everything, I get a good payoff. And this segment of the video that he did, which I should be able to use by fair use because I'm going to give commentary and reaction for education. He talks about the need, in my opinion, a good reason why you should study the martial arts, especially if you are a man. And especially, of course, if you're a black man, but especially if you are a man. Now, before I get into, I'm going to play his commentary and give my little interruptions and reactions. I'm going to say this. See, a lot of people try to argue against traditional martial arts and would argue against the style that I created, Cecil martial arts, because they're going to say the techniques are unrealistic, or when you get them to admit that, yeah, these techniques actually do work, they say it requires strength. This situation is where your strength would not be an issue because this is talking about a man defending himself against a woman. And in most cases, men are physically stronger than women. And if they have to use these techniques to defend themselves, not to hurt the woman, but to counter and redirect the energy, redirect the attack, or defuse the situation because it's gone physical and you can't bring it back down. These techniques, these control techniques, these lock techniques, even these block techniques, this is when they work. This is when they come in handy. And the need is real. For those of you who are in your ego, you think, oh, there's no way a woman can hurt me. There's no way a woman can hurt a man. That's not true. If you want to say, oh, a big, strong man, you don't need to protect yourself against women, that's not true. And Dr. Hassan tells us why. So let's take a look.
So you have to prepare yourself, brothers, for not being supported. Shout out to Dr. CD2. Shout out to Egbert Field. Appreciate that support. Appreciate the compliment. Shout out to Apolio. Says, I can't do it. I'm too crazy for this to happen to me. I'm glad that I'm single-ish with no kids. And you got to know those limits, too. You got to know your own limits.
Where else but a better place to know your limits when it comes to physical conflict than in a martial art or combat sport that's going to push you to your limits, make you break those limits in a socially approved way so that your limits can increase. Once you get to your limit of frustration, you break it, you rebuild it, your limit increases. It will improve.
Because I'm going to tell you, when I was a kid, and this is, I know this as a kid, and I'm mindful of it now. When I was a kid, when I would get into fights, which was a lot, because I was angry about my family my mother and father having a divorce when I was 5. When I met my stepmother, I didn't understand. I just, saw this woman walking down my father's hallway one day. I didn't know who she was, and I didn't understand what was going on. So I had a lot of rage as a kid. I was in a lot of fights. But what would happen is, I went to a predominantly white public school. So there were a lot of the fights were about race.
He's talking about dealing with rage, violence, fighting at a very young age. That's why it's a good idea to put your children in martial arts at a very young age. You can look at it as, oh, well, they'll have an outlet for their frustration. But also, if they have a good traditional teacher who really cares about his or her students, that traditional teacher can get that child to talk about what's going on while you're going through your forms. Can help the child process and understand things. And I'm not saying that, we're amateur psychiatrists, but anybody, sometimes even a kid, sometimes just knowing that somebody listens and cares can help out a lot. And also, that teacher can be another responsible adult that can say something to the parents, say, hey, little Johnny, little Timmy, little Jamal, little Raul, little Julio, little Abdul, little Young is having trouble. I noticed this. He or she said this. So please say something to little Takesha. They can give the parents a heads up. That's all I'm saying. And the frustration tolerance that you build up in the martial arts, even for children, will help them to control their temper.
And all I remember is I would black out at the height of the back and forth. I would black out. The next thing I know, I'd be sitting in the principal's office, and they would be calling the hospital for something I did to some kid. I didn't remember what I did. I'm just straight Bruce Banner style. I just would black out. Not the best thing if you know anything about trained hand-to-hand combat, but when you're a kid, you're talking about kindergarten through 6th or 7th grade, you can do a lot of damage. And I did. A lot of pent up rage, straight up. But a lot of that was in response to, situations I didn't know how to deal with.
Now he's going to talk about the problems that you can have as an adult male, especially in domestic violence situations, where men can be victims of domestic violence situations in heterosexual relationships. His approach that he has, I don't know if he's a martial artist or not, his approach is the best. It's above technique, which is to avoid all types of domestic physical confrontation if at all possible. That's what's best. Technique can come in if you just can't avoid it, or if it just took you by surprise. Listen to what he says and listen to these statistics and facts that he gives. Very enlightening.
Now, fast forward to adulthood. I avoid, especially with women, situations that can get crazy. Because if I black out, I don't know what I'll come to. And this has actually happened to a lot of men. See, because when we talk about abuse, we start the discussion at men's response. We ignore everything prior. Matter of fact, to even bring up what may have happened prior is considered blaming the victim. So it's considered uncouth, therefore you don't do it. But it's more and can be more than just a casual argument. She can actually be physically abusive herself. It can actually start from a need of self-defense and go much further. What we know about the data is women tend to strike first. They tend to use weapons to a greater degree. Men tend to use their own hands. So women strike first. Men create visible damage. Women tend to use weapons. Men use their own hands. And if it goes too far, you can black out and end up finding yourself in a situation that may cost you the rest of your life sitting in a cell. So I'm a huge advocate of getting up and leaving. If you need to do that, you need to know yourself. And that's the whole reason I brought up me blacking out as a kid. You have to know yourself. If you know you have limits that you just don't want to test, you've seen in the past when those limits, what happens when you go past that, you need to know what you are capable of. If you don't know what you're capable of, not some shit you want to find out in the moment. I do not want to wake up in my 40s heading to a cell because I blacked out. So whatever your limits are, be mindful of it when you're dealing with people that are using situations against you simply because they can.
And I think that the traditional martial arts are a good way for you to find out your limits. And if you're near me, take my class and I can help you find out your limits. And you can help me with my limits. And we can all increase our limits and know them together. Thanks for watching this video. Like, comment, and subscribe. Please share this with people who like to talk about the martial arts in peace. And one more thing, go back and watch this video again and go watch his original video that I'm going to link to eventually. And please be mindful of people who are trying to bait you into violence just so they can use the system against you. They can be male, they can be female, they can be any color or creed. What they are manipulative snakes. Peace, and as always, thank you for your time.